Hello everyone, and welcome back to Creepy Mr. Night. I know many of you enjoy using these videos to help you sleep, so before you drift off, I thought it'd be fun for everyone to leave a comment, letting me know where you're listening from around the world. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy the content. Now, let's get comfy, relax, and begin. Story 1. Erica Summers appeared to have everything. At 32, she was a woman who had it all. A prestigious career in a top law firm, a family that adored her, a sleek downtown apartment that exuded success, and a circle of close friends who could count on her for anything. To the outside world, Erica's life was flawless. Her family, the warm, supportive Summers clan, was a constant presence in her life. Her parents, Anne and Greg, had always been proud of her accomplishments. Her younger brother, Ben, was her confidant, her go-to person whenever life became overwhelming. But behind the polished surface of Erica's life, there were cracks, small but growing. Erica had a fierce need to appear perfect. She was the kind of woman who never let anyone see her vulnerable side and never revealed her fears or struggles. Even her family, despite their closeness, had no idea that Erica was carrying a heavy burden. Her death, which came so suddenly, shattered that illusion. It was a Sunday morning when the news came. The police were the first to call. "We're sorry to inform you, but Erica Summers has been found dead in her apartment. It looks like a suicide." The words echoed in Ben's ears as he clutched the phone. He felt numb, unable to process the statement. Erica was gone. It didn't make sense. The police had found Erica in her apartment, her body slumped over on the floor, an empty bottle of pills beside her. The note she had left seemed to confirm the tragic conclusion. In her elegant handwriting, she had written, "I'm sorry. I couldn't do it anymore. Please forgive me." To her family, it was a bitter pill to swallow, but it seemed like the only explanation. Anne and Greg, devastated but resigned to the idea of their daughter's pain, began the mournful task of funeral arrangements. Ben, still reeling, tried to find solace in the memories of better days, but something didn't sit right. A few days after the funeral, as Anne was sorting through Erica's personal belongings, she found something that stopped her heart. Beneath a pile of papers, hidden in the back of Erica's drawer, was an envelope. The envelope was addressed to her, Anne. The handwriting was unmistakable. It was Erica's. Trembling, Anne opened it, not knowing what to expect. The letter read, "I would never do this. I didn't take my life. Someone made it look like I did. You have to find out who." The words shook Anne to her core. The devastation of Erica's death, which she had only begun to process, was now joined by confusion and fear. Erica had left the world with a note suggesting that her death was not a suicide, but a carefully executed murder. Anne didn't know what to do. The police had already ruled it a suicide, the case closed. But this letter changed everything. She called Ben immediately. "We need to talk," Anne said, her voice trembling. Ben arrived at his parents' house within an hour. He could see the fear and confusion on his mother's face, and when she handed him the letter, his heart skipped a beat. He read it slowly, over and over, trying to make sense of it. Erica, the person he'd known his entire life, could never have done this. But if she hadn't, then someone else was responsible. The family was thrust into turmoil once again. Ben was the first to suggest they reopen the investigation. He had a hard time accepting the police's conclusion, not because he didn't trust law enforcement, but because of the nagging feeling that something was off. How could Erica, who had always been so strong and determined, end her life? And if she hadn't, who would want to hurt her? Ben began to push the police, demanding that they reconsider the case, but the authorities were resistant. They had closed the case as a suicide, and they saw no reason to reopen it. Frustrated and feeling helpless, the Summers family turned to an old family friend, Detective Ryan Holt, who had known Erica since she was a child. Holt agreed to look into it, though he was initially skeptical. The idea that a successful, well-liked woman like Erica would be murdered seemed far-fetched. Holt started with the basics, re-examining the crime scene. The apartment had appeared pristine, a textbook suicide. The bottle of pills had been found beside her, and the position of the body seemed consistent with the story of a fatal overdose. But when Holt looked closer, something struck him. There were no signs of a struggle, no fingerprints on the bottle of pills, and no signs of Erica's usual anxiety or emotional turmoil. It didn't add up. The deeper Holt dug, the more secrets came to light. Erica had been receiving mysterious phone calls in the weeks leading up to her death. At first, no one had thought much of them, just casual work-related calls, or so it seemed. But as Holt spoke to her friends and colleagues, he learned that Erica had been acting oddly before her death. She had become withdrawn, increasingly secretive, and had begun to distance herself from her family. Even more troubling were the financial records Holt uncovered. Erica had been drowning in debt, credit card bills, loans, and unpaid personal expenses. It seemed impossible that someone with such a successful career would fall into such financial turmoil. But there it was, on paper. And then, there was the relationship she had kept hidden. A toxic, abusive relationship with a man named David Moore, a co-worker from the law firm. No one knew about him. No one except Erica's closest confidants. David was controlling, manipulative, and had a dark side that Erica had kept under wraps. A few days before her death, Erica had confided in her best friend that she was planning to leave him, but she was terrified of the consequences. As Holt pieced the puzzle together, it became clear that Erica's death was not just the result of one tragedy, but a culmination of many tangled threads, secrets, lies, and betrayal. The more the family and Holt learned, the more suspects emerged. David Moore, the abusive ex-lover, was the obvious first choice. He had the motive. Erica had planned to break free from him, and he had a history of violent behavior. But when Holt interviewed him, he seemed oddly calm, almost too calm. His alibi checked out, and he had an airtight defense. He wasn't a perfect man, but he wasn't the killer. Then there was Samantha, Erica's colleague and so-called best friend. Samantha had been jealous of Erica's success for years, and it seemed that she might have had something to gain from Erica's death. But when Holt looked into her history, he found nothing solid to suggest she was involved. As the investigation deepened, the family began to suspect someone much closer to home. Was it possible that someone in the family had a darker side? Anne began to question everything: her own memories of Erica, her relationships with her, and the secrets she might have kept hidden. The unraveling of the case mirrored the unraveling of their family's sense of security. The investigation hit a dead end until a breakthrough came when a forensic analysis of Erica's phone revealed a series of deleted messages. One in particular stood out: a text exchange with a man named Alex Turner, an old childhood friend. Alex was an unexpected name, someone who had been out of touch with Erica for years. Yet, when Holt tracked him down, Alex seemed to know more about Erica's recent troubles than anyone had expected. He revealed that Erica had been confiding in him about a plan to leave the city, to start over. But he also admitted that Erica had mentioned something disturbing. A family member, someone close to her, had been pressuring her for money. Alex's revelation sent a chill down Holt's spine. Could it be that someone from Erica's family had been manipulating her for financial gain? The twist came when Holt uncovered a secret financial account linked to Erica's father, Greg Summers. It had been hidden for years, funds that Erica had unknowingly transferred to him. The deeper Holt looked, the more disturbing it became. Greg had been using Erica's success to cover up his own financial ruin. Holt confronted Greg, and in a tense confrontation, Greg admitted that he had been struggling with gambling debts and had manipulated Erica into bailing him out. But when she began to question his motives and threatened to expose him, Greg realized that he couldn't afford to lose her. The realization hit like a ton of bricks. Greg had orchestrated Erica's death, staging it as a suicide to collect a large life insurance payout. The truth shattered the family. Greg was arrested, and the investigation came to a heartbreaking close. Erica's death had been an act of cold-blooded revenge, rooted in years of manipulation and deceit. As the Summers family grappled with the loss of their beloved Erica, they were left to confront the darkness that had existed within their own walls. The scars left by the investigation ran deep, and the family struggled to find a sense of closure. Erica's death had taught them a painful lesson. Sometimes the people closest to us are the ones capable of the darkest deeds. Justice had been served, but at a cost. Detective Marlowe stood in the middle of the small, dimly lit apartment, his eyes scanning the crime scene with a mixture of professionalism and unease. The air was thick with the stale scent of loneliness, the faint odor of dust mixing with something more metallic. Thomas Caldwell, the victim, lay sprawled across the floor, a pool of blood surrounding him, the glint of a knife still lodged deep in his chest. The most perplexing detail wasn't the murder itself. It was the absence of any apparent motive. The victim's apartment, a sparsely furnished one-bedroom unit, showed no signs of forced entry, no signs of struggle. Nothing had been stolen. There were no obvious traces of an intruder. Marlowe's trained eyes caught the telltale marks of a struggle, but they were brief, like the victim had put up a token defense before succumbing. The most chilling part of the scene, however, was the large mirror hanging on the wall directly across from the body. Thomas's eyes, still wide open in death, stared not at the knife lodged in his chest, but at his own reflection in the glass. As Marlowe's eyes traced the reflection, something unsettling hit him. The bloodied knife was still in Thomas's hand, but there was one detail that couldn't be ignored. The only fingerprints on the handle were Thomas's own. He stepped closer, examining the reflection carefully. It wasn't just that Thomas had been holding the knife. It was as though the reflection had a life of its own, something deeper in its expression. Marlowe felt a prickle on the back of his neck, a strange feeling that this murder wasn't what it appeared to be. There was a hidden message here. He was sure of it. But what was it? Detective Marlowe? A voice pulled him from his thoughts. It was his partner, Officer Daniels, standing at the doorway. We've checked the rest of the building. No one saw or heard anything. And we got a list of Thomas's contacts. You might want to take a look. Marlowe nodded, stepping back from the body, still trying to shake the odd feeling. It was as if the mirror was watching him back. The next few days were a blur of interviews and evidence collection. But one thing Marlowe kept coming back to was the victim's life. Thomas Caldwell had been a solitary man, an enigma even to those who thought they knew him. There were no obvious enemies, no history of trouble with the law. His neighbors described him as reclusive, a man who kept to himself, avoiding social gatherings and barely speaking to anyone beyond necessary pleasantries. His ex-fiancée, Maria Baines, seemed to be the only person who had known him well enough to provide any real insight into his life. She was hesitant at first, clearly troubled by the memory of their relationship, but after some gentle coaxing, she opened up. "We were engaged for 2 years," Maria said, her voice tinged with a mixture of sadness and bitterness. But it wasn't the happy kind of engagement. He became more withdrawn, started acting strange, like he was losing touch with himself. I thought maybe it was work stress at first, but then he started talking about things that didn't make sense. "Like what?" Marlowe pressed, leaning forward in his chair. "Mirrors, reflections. He said he saw things in them, not just his reflection, but something else, something that wasn't him. I thought he was just losing his mind. I left him after that. I couldn't handle it anymore." Marlowe's mind buzzed with the implications. Could Thomas's obsession with mirrors have played a part in his death? After interviewing Maria, Marlowe visited Thomas's workplace, a small design firm where Thomas had worked as a graphic designer. His colleagues described him as quiet, but competent. No signs of any problems at work, but one comment caught Marlowe's attention. "Thomas was always fascinated by illusions," said Neil, a co-worker. "He used to talk about how reflections can change our perception of reality. You know, the kind of stuff you read in psychology books. He said mirrors were more than just glass. He said they could hide things. He was obsessed with them, really." Marlowe's thoughts swirled. Was there something more to this than just a man who went mad? Next, Marlowe turned his attention to a neighbor of Thomas's, an eccentric man named Victor Crane. Victor lived 2 floors below Thomas and was known for his bizarre behavior. Marlowe had heard whispers that Victor had a collection of antique mirrors, each one more elaborate than the last. He was a man who lived alone, rarely seen outside his apartment, but who always seemed to be watching. When Marlowe arrived at Victor's apartment, the door was ajar. Inside, the air smelled musty, and the walls were lined with mirrors, some small, some large, some framed with intricate designs. They reflected the dim light in a disorienting way, making the small apartment seem even smaller. Victor was sitting on a threadbare armchair in the middle of the room, staring at one of the mirrors with an intensity that was both unsettling and hypnotic. He didn't seem to notice Marlowe enter. "Mr. Crane?" Marlowe called, his voice firm. Victor blinked, his gaze snapping toward the detective as if he had just realized someone was there. "Oh, detective, I didn't hear you," Victor said, his voice soft and almost detached. "What brings you to my humble abode?" "We're investigating the murder of Thomas Caldwell," Marlowe began, watching Victor closely for any signs of reaction. "He lived 2 floors above you. You knew him?" Victor's eyes flickered momentarily, and Marlowe caught a brief flash of something. Fear? Guilt? It was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by a neutral expression. "I knew him, a quiet man. But you should ask the mirrors," Victor replied cryptically. "They know him better than I ever could." The strange comment unsettled Marlowe, but he pressed on. "Do you know anything about his obsession with mirrors?" Victor smiled faintly. "Mirrors are more than just reflections. They hold secrets, things we can't always see. Thomas, he was searching for something in them. But sometimes, what we search for isn't what we find." Marlowe's final lead took him to Dr. Emily Hawk, a therapist who had treated Thomas Caldwell for a number of months prior to his death. Dr. Hawk was composed, professional, but there was something about her demeanor that seemed off. When Marlowe asked about Thomas's treatment, she hesitated before speaking. "Thomas came to me with dissociative identity disorder," she said quietly, her eyes avoiding Marlowe's gaze. He was struggling with two distinct personalities. One was a quiet, introverted man, and the other, well, the other was far more dangerous. It wasn't just a mental disorder. There were deeper layers to his condition. Dangerous how? Marlowe pressed, leaning in. He became violent at times, Dr. Hawk replied, her voice shaky. He would talk about seeing a reflection that wasn't his own. He said it was a different version of himself, a version that could hurt people. He had no control over it. I believed he was having some kind of psychotic break, but the mirrors. He believed the mirrors were connected to it. They were a window into his alternate self. The pieces were starting to fall into place. Thomas's obsession with mirrors, his mental health issues, the disturbing details of his life. All of it pointed to something far darker than Marlowe had initially imagined. The more Marlowe pieced together the fragments of Thomas Caldwell's life, the more he felt like a man chasing shadows in a fog. His mind was filled with contradictions. A quiet man, withdrawn and isolated, but one who harbored a dark secret, an alternate personality linked to the very object that had been central to his death, the mirror. But how could an inanimate object be so connected to something so sinister? And could it be that Thomas's death wasn't the result of some external murderer, but a twisted internal battle? Marlowe stood in his office, studying the photos of the crime scene. Each angle of Thomas's body, each reflection in the mirror, seemed to tell a different story. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was something hidden in plain sight, something in the reflection of the glass that he had missed. He kept coming back to Victor Crane's cryptic words, "Mirrors hold secrets." He turned to Officer Daniels, who had been tirelessly tracking down any leads. "What about Thomas's therapy sessions? Can we get a detailed record of his sessions with Dr. Hawk?" Daniels nodded. "I'll pull the files, but it's all pretty standard stuff. A lot of talk about his mental health, about his dissociative episodes. Nothing that suggests he would kill himself, unless the reflection did it for him." Marlowe's eyes darkened. "That's what I'm afraid of. The reflection wasn't just a part of him. It was him." The more Marlowe pondered the idea of Thomas's mental disorder, the more he began to suspect that the truth was much darker than anyone had anticipated. What if the mirrors weren't just a symptom of his condition, but the cause? He knew there was only one person who might shed light on this: Dr. Emily Hawk. The next morning, Marlowe arranged a meeting with her. When they sat down in her sterile white office, the air between them felt thick. Dr. Hawk's eyes darted nervously around the room, as if expecting someone, or something, to appear from the shadows. "I've reviewed Thomas's case in detail," she began, her voice strained, "and I've come to realize that there may have been something more to it than just dissociative identity disorder." Marlowe leaned forward. "What do you mean? Was there something you didn't tell me before?" She hesitated, then sighed deeply. "There was an experiment, a dangerous one, that I conducted, without fully understanding the consequences. Thomas was one of my subjects." Marlowe's blood ran cold. "What kind of experiment?" Dr. Hawk ran her hands through her hair, clearly shaken. "I've been studying the connection between the mind and perception. Mirrors, reflections. They're a window into how we perceive ourselves. I believed that by altering a person's perception of their reflection, I could help them unlock their true self. A method to break free from self-imposed limitations." "You used Thomas as a subject for this?" Marlowe's voice was sharp, incredulous. "Yes, he was an ideal candidate, but somewhere along the way, I lost control. He became fixated on his reflection, not in the way I intended, but to the point where it started to control him. created something in the mirror. Something darker, something more dangerous than he was. His other personality, Marlowe murmured, piecing the information together. But it wasn't just a mental disorder. I didn't know what I was doing, Dr. Hawk interrupted, her voice barely a whisper. The reflection, it wasn't just a projection of his mind. It became something else. It took on a life of its own. Marlowe's stomach tightened. Are you saying Thomas's reflection became real? She nodded. In a way. The more he obsessed over it, the more the mirror became a doorway. It was no longer just a reflection. The other Thomas, the one he feared, began to emerge. He wasn't imagining it, Detective. The reflection was another person, another Thomas. Marlowe left Dr. Hawk's office with a storm brewing inside him. Everything was falling apart. He had expected a straightforward investigation, but now he was faced with the terrifying notion that Thomas Caldwell hadn't just been killed, he had been consumed, and worse, the mirror had been the key to it all. As Marlowe drove back to the crime scene, his thoughts raced. He knew he had to see the mirror again. Something in that glass had to give him the final piece of the puzzle. There was a strange pull to the mirror, something almost hypnotic about it. He felt it even now, as if the reflection was calling to him. Arriving at Thomas's apartment, Marlowe stood before the mirror, his own reflection staring back at him. He felt a coldness in the room, an oppressive weight pressing down on him. He studied the glass for a long moment. Then, without thinking, he reached out and touched the surface. The moment his fingers grazed the mirror, a jolt ran through him, a sharp, sudden awareness of something other, a presence behind the glass. His heart pounded in his chest. He pulled his hand back quickly, but not before he saw it. In the reflection, Thomas's body was no longer lying on the floor. It was standing, staring back at Marlowe through the glass. For a split second, Marlowe's blood ran cold. The figure in the mirror was no longer just Thomas. It was something else, something distorted, a twisted version of the man he had been investigating. Marlowe blinked, and when he looked again, the figure was gone. Thomas's body was back where it had been, lifeless on the floor. But it had been real. Marlowe knew it had been real. The pieces finally clicked into place. Marlowe had been chasing the wrong clues all along. The mirror hadn't just been a symbol, it had been a portal. Thomas Caldwell's reflection had never been just a reflection. It had been a separate entity, a darker version of himself that had existed in the glass. And when Thomas died, that reflection had taken over, leaving behind only the body. Marlowe now understood the final horrifying truth. Thomas hadn't been murdered by an outside force. He had killed himself by unleashing his alternate personality, his reflection. But it wasn't an act of self-destruction. It was an act of transfer. The alternate Thomas had become the real Thomas. The reflection had claimed its place in the world, and the real Thomas had ceased to exist. But the reflection wasn't gone. It wasn't just a figment of Thomas's fractured mind. It was alive, and now that it had tasted freedom, it would do anything to preserve its existence. Marlowe realized with sickening clarity that the reflection, this thing, was not done. It was still out there. And worse, Marlowe had made contact with it. He had touched the mirror, felt its presence. He wasn't just investigating a crime anymore. He was trapped in a game that had no rules, a game where mirrors could kill, and no one was safe from what they reflected. The final twist was waiting for him, and the reflection had already claimed its next victim. Marlowe couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. After his encounter with the mirror in Thomas's apartment, Every passing moment seemed to be haunted by the lingering presence of something other, something that had been trapped inside the glass. The events of the past few days were starting to blur together. What had begun as a straightforward investigation into a man's death had unraveled into something far more sinister. Marlowe felt like he was standing on the edge of an abyss, and each step he took brought him closer to falling in. That night, as he sat in his dark office, reviewing his notes, his thoughts kept returning to the reflection. It wasn't just a piece of glass. It wasn't just a symbol of Thomas's fractured psyche. The reflection was a living entity, a separate malevolent force that had crossed the line between the world of the dead and the living. And now, Marlowe knew, it was hunting him. He was snapped from his thoughts by a knock at the door. It was Daniels, looking pale, his face drawn tight with worry. "Detective, you need to see this." Marlowe followed Daniels to a nearby apartment complex, one that had been mentioned in a report about another unusual incident. The building was eerily quiet, and the dim hallway lights flickered intermittently. When they arrived at the apartment in question, Marlowe's gut tightened. The door was slightly ajar, and the air in the hallway was unnaturally cold. Inside, the scene was even more unsettling. The apartment belonged to a woman named Claire Harris, who had been a neighbor of Thomas's. She was the latest victim, a well-known artist who had lived in the building for years. But now, she was dead, sprawled out in front of a mirror, much like Thomas had been. Her body was positioned in a grotesque way, as though she had been forced to face the reflection until the last moment of her life. Her eyes were wide open in terror, locked on the mirror across from her. But it was the mirror itself that caught Marlowe's attention. It wasn't just a simple reflection. As he stepped closer, he swore the reflection in the glass wasn't just Claire. It shifted, as though it was changing, warping into something else, something dark. "Get back!" Marlowe shouted, pulling Daniels away from the mirror. But it was too late. The room seemed to shift around them, and Marlowe's heart skipped a beat. In the reflection, he could see himself now, standing right beside Claire's body. His face twisted into a grotesque version of itself, one that seemed to smirk back at him with a malevolent hunger. "Detective, you okay?" Daniels asked, looking at him with concern. Marlowe's mind raced. What was happening? Was he seeing things? His eyes darted back to the mirror, but the reflection of himself was gone. Claire was alone again, lifeless, staring back at him. "It's the mirror," Marlowe whispered to himself. "It's not just a reflection. It's alive." Marlowe spent the following hours in a daze, unable to focus. The reflection had followed him, even into the real world. But it wasn't just that. The reflection seemed to be playing with him, toying with him like a predator with its prey. He had seen it before, in Thomas's apartment, and now here it was again, creeping into reality. He tried to shake it off. He had to keep moving. He had to end this. But as he walked through the darkened streets, heading back to his office, he felt the weight of the nightmare closing in on him. He wasn't just investigating the murder anymore. He was being stalked by it. The reflection, the thing that had killed Thomas. And now, it was taking people one by one. Marlowe's eyes darted toward every passing window, every reflective surface, his heart pounding in his chest. Could it be anywhere? Could it be in his own reflection, even now? He didn't know what to do next. His mind was unraveling. The lines between reality and madness had blurred beyond recognition. The breakthrough came late one night, as Marlowe sat alone in his apartment, staring at the dim reflection in his own window. He knew he had to face the mirror one last time, to confront whatever it was that had taken Thomas's life and was now haunting him. He grabbed his coat and rushed out of his apartment, driven by a desperate need to end this. He knew where he had to go, the last place where he might uncover the truth: Dr. Emily Hawke's office. When Marlowe arrived at the building, the lights were out, and the hallway was as still and silent as a tomb. But he wasn't afraid anymore. He had to face the truth, no matter what. He found her office, the door locked, but he didn't hesitate. Breaking the door open, he stepped inside. Dr. Hawke was sitting at her desk, a blank expression on her face as she gazed into the reflection of a large mirror that hung on the wall. But this wasn't the same mirror. It was different, larger, darker, more oppressive. "Dr. Hawke," Marlowe said, his voice hoarse. "What have you done?" She didn't react at first, but then she turned to face him, her eyes hollow, her skin pale. "You shouldn't have come here, Detective," she said, her voice a whisper. "It's already too late." Marlowe's pulse quickened. The reflection, Thomas's reflection. It's real, isn't it? It's alive. Dr. Hawke's lips curled into a faint smile. It's not just alive. It's evolving. It's taken control of him, taken control of all of us. You're part of it now, too. You've touched the mirror. You've seen the other side. There's no going back. Marlowe's mind reeled. No going back. The reflection wasn't just a part of Thomas's mind. It had crossed over, gained power, and now it was growing. The reflection in the mirror seemed to move again, and Marlowe's breath caught in his throat. It wasn't just a trick of the light. It was changing, contorting, and then, there it was. A figure, one that didn't belong, standing in the reflection behind Dr. Hawke. The dark version of Thomas, the twisted reflection, its eyes fixed on Marlowe. It was smiling. Suddenly, the room went cold. The air shifted, thick with an unnatural presence. Marlowe stepped backward, his mind racing. Was this it? Had the reflection come to claim him, to drag him into its world? But then, a voice, familiar yet distorted, whispered in his ear, "You're already mine." Marlowe spun around, but the room was empty. The reflection, Thomas, or whatever he had become, was gone. Dr. Hawke's chair was empty too. The mirror had consumed her. It had consumed them all. Marlowe understood the horrifying truth in that moment. The mirror wasn't just a window. It was a gateway, a portal to another world, a world where the reflections ruled, where the twisted versions of people took control. And now, Marlowe had crossed that line. The reflection had claimed him. Marlowe's eyes fell to the mirror once more. His own reflection stared back at him, but it wasn't him anymore. The reflection smiled, and in that moment, Marlowe realized it was never the mirror that was the murderer. It was the reflection itself. Westbrook was a town that had surrendered to time. Tucked between thick forests and winding rivers, it seemed to exist in a perpetual fog, where the passage of years barely made a mark. The residents lived simple, quiet lives. People who came and went, but never truly changed the landscape of this forgotten corner of the world. There was no rush, no urgency, just the sound of the wind whistling through broken windows, the occasional laughter of children playing in dusty streets, and the church bell ringing at noon. For most of the world, Westbrook might as well have been a ghost town, a place where even the history was hard to remember, buried beneath layers of dust and time. But not for Evelyn Harper. She had always known that Westbrook, for all its sleepy charm, was hiding something darker. Evelyn had been born in Westbrook, the daughter of Nathan Harper, a man who had lived in the town his whole life. He'd raised her in the shadow of its secrets, teaching her, without words, that the past should remain buried. Her father, once the town's unofficial historian, had spent countless nights poring over old records, visiting the local library's dusty archives, and cataloging everything from birth certificates to the missing persons reports. There had been a time when Nathan had seemed obsessed with Westbrook's past, writing down the details of forgotten murders and unsolved mysteries that no one else cared to remember. When Evelyn's father passed away suddenly, a heart attack, or so the doctor said, she had inherited his files. Her father's obsession became hers. Even though it had cost him his life, Evelyn felt a compulsion to continue his work. The town's history, once dismissed as irrelevant, began to gnaw at her, a puzzle that demanded to be solved. There were gaps in the records, and Evelyn wanted to fill them. But some gaps were better left untouched. It was during one of her late-night visits to the mill that Evelyn first encountered the typewriter. The Westbrook Old Mill had been abandoned for decades. Once, it had been the heart of the town's economy, where grains were ground and sawdust filled the air. But over time, it had fallen into disrepair, a silent monument to a forgotten age. There had always been rumors about the mill, a place where strange noises could be heard at night, where shadows moved even when no one was there. Evelyn had always felt a strange pull toward the mill, but she couldn't explain why. Perhaps it was her inherited curiosity about the town's forgotten past. Or perhaps it was the chilling stories that swirled around the mill like a constant whispering wind. People said the mill was haunted, that it was where several locals had disappeared without a trace, their bodies never found. She had gone there many times in the past, during the day, seeking nothing more than a few historical photographs or forgotten town records tucked away in forgotten drawers. But tonight, something was different. She had received an anonymous letter, a letter written in jagged handwriting that sent a shiver down her spine. The letter simply said, "It's waiting for you." As she stepped inside the mill's dark, cavernous space, Evelyn's flashlight flickered, casting long, eerie shadows on the walls. The place felt colder than it should have been for a summer night. The air was thick with dust, and the sound of her footsteps echoed around her like distant memories. Then she heard it. The soft clack, clack, clack of keys being typed, faint at first, but unmistakable. She froze, heart pounding in her chest. Evelyn turned toward the sound, her light falling upon the old wooden table at the far corner of the room. And there, sitting alone, was an ancient typewriter, one she had never seen before. It was a relic from another era, its keys worn with use, but still intact. The paper feed was set, and the machine continued to type on its own. The sound was hypnotic. Compelled, Evelyn approached the table and reached out to touch the yellowed paper. Her breath caught in her throat when she read the first line. I, William Ross, confess to the murder of Alice Madsen, 1923. I killed her because she knew too much. I couldn't let her ruin everything. Evelyn's heart skipped a beat. The name William Ross immediately struck her. She had heard it before. Ross had been one of Westbrook's founding families, a name tied to the town's most infamous unsolved murder. Alice Madsen, a young woman who had vanished without a trace over a century ago. The case had never been solved, but the rumors surrounding Alice's disappearance had haunted the town for generations. Evelyn felt the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end. Was this some cruel joke? A hoax? But it didn't feel like one. The words on the page were precise, chillingly detailed, as if someone had been there, had witnessed the event firsthand. The typewriter clicked again, its keys moving as if possessed. Evelyn quickly scanned the paper for more, and another confession appeared. I, Thomas Madsen, confess to the death of my sister, Alice. I killed her because she was going to reveal our family's darkest secret. Evelyn's stomach churned. The confession was more than she could comprehend. Thomas Madsen? Alice's brother? Her mind raced. Alice Madsen had been the key to uncovering something horrible, something that tied the Madsen family to the Rosses. But the secret had remained hidden, until now. Evelyn's pulse quickened as she clutched the confession papers. She couldn't ignore it. The confessions, these admissions of guilt, were just the beginning. There was something bigger at play here, something far darker than a simple town mystery. The next day, Evelyn went straight to the town records office. She knew that what she had uncovered was no coincidence. She needed to understand who had written those confessions, and why now, after so many years, were they surfacing? What was the purpose of these admissions, and what did they have to do with her own family? As she combed through the dusty archives, Evelyn felt a growing unease. There were gaps in the records, places where names had been deliberately omitted, details left out. She found mention of the Rosses and the Madsens, two of the most influential families in the town's history. But there was one name that kept popping up in the shadows: Richard Thorne. Richard Thorne was a ghost story in Westbrook. The name came up in connection to unsolved crimes and shady dealings, but there were no records that clearly defined who he was. Some said he had been the town's first mayor, a man who had disappeared under strange circumstances. Others believed he was a wealthy landowner whose influence had seeped into every aspect of the town's history. But Evelyn could find no hard facts, only rumors, only whispers, and the typewriter. The pieces were falling into place, but they didn't make sense. Westbrook's history was tied to the Ross and Madsen families, but there was something about Richard Thorne's legacy that was different, something hidden beneath the surface of the town's past. Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling that the typewriter had a purpose. It was a tool, yes, but a tool for what? Who had used it to draw her into this web of secrets? And why was she the one uncovering it? The morning after her discovery at the mill, Evelyn found herself back in the town archives, surrounded by piles of old documents, yellowed photographs, and forgotten memories. The weight of the confessions she had uncovered the night before pressed down on her. The name William Ross and the chilling words he had written haunted her thoughts. Evelyn knew she couldn't ignore what she had found. There was a reason these confessions were appearing now, after all these years. And it wasn't just about exposing the town's past. It was about something far darker. The feeling that something sinister was watching her grew stronger with every passing hour. She couldn't shake the sense that the town itself was alive with its secrets, and that she was in the middle of something far bigger than she had anticipated. There was no logical explanation for the typewriter, no reason why it was typing confessions that dated back decades. And the more she tried to piece together the puzzle, the more it seemed like it was being deliberately orchestrated. The typewriter, an object as ancient as the town itself, had become a vehicle for something powerful, a force that didn't just want to expose the truth, it wanted to control it. And worse still, it wanted to drag those involved in the original crimes back into the nightmare. The confessions weren't just admissions of guilt, they were a message. The old records and photographs in the town archives held pieces of the puzzle. But Evelyn realized she needed to dig deeper. She needed to speak to those who might still remember what had happened. Her next step was clear. Evelyn decided to visit Helen Forsyth, an elderly woman who had lived in Westbrook her entire life. Helen was one of the few people in town whose memory of the past was still sharp, and rumors had always whispered that she knew more than she let on. Helen had lived through the town's darkest moments, through the disappearances, the untimely deaths, the tragedies that no one had ever really understood. Helen's house was perched on the edge of town, an old Victorian that had seen better days. Ivy crawled up the sides of the house, and the windows, though clean, looked out over a vast, overgrown yard. Evelyn had known Helen since childhood, but the woman had always been a little distant, like someone who preferred to keep her distance from the world. Today, however, Helen's posture was even more closed off than usual, as if she were bracing for something. When Evelyn knocked, it took a while for Helen to answer. When the door finally creaked open, the old woman looked at her with tired eyes. "You've come to ask questions, haven't you?" Helen's voice was thin, her words heavy with an almost ancient sorrow. Evelyn nodded, her throat tight. "I have to know the truth, Helen, about Alice Madsen, about the Ross family, about everything." Helen's eyes flickered, and for a moment, Evelyn thought the old woman might slam the door in her face. But instead, Helen stepped aside and allowed her in. The inside of the house was dim, the air thick with the scent of old books and candle wax. There was a sense of decay here too, like the house was trying to hold on to its memories, but was slowly losing its grip. "Sit down, Evelyn," Helen said softly, motioning to a chair by the fireplace. "You're not the first to come looking for answers, but you might be the last. I've kept quiet for a long time, but now, it seems like the past is coming back, like it wants something from us." Evelyn sat, feeling the weight of those words sink into her chest. "What do you mean?" Helen sighed deeply, staring into the fire as if it held all the answers she needed. "You don't know what you've stumbled into, do you? Westbrook. It's not just any town. It's built on secrets, built on sins. And those sins, they don't die. They fester. And now they've come back." Evelyn leaned forward. "What does that have to do with the typewriter?" Helen's eyes narrowed, a flash of recognition crossing her face. "Ah, you've found it. That cursed thing. It's not just some relic, you know. It's the heart of all this. The typewriter is a gateway, a way for the past to come to life again. It has ties to Richard Thorne. He was the one who started it all, and when he disappeared, the town became his vessel. The typewriter. It was his idea of justice, and it won't stop until it's claimed what it wants." "Richard Thorne?" Evelyn repeated, a chill running down her spine. "Who was he?" Helen's voice dropped to a whisper. "Thorne was a powerful man, too powerful for his own good. He wasn't a good man, mind you. He was a manipulator, a schemer. But he had a vision. He thought he could control everything, control the town's history, control its people. And he nearly succeeded, until the day he disappeared, leaving behind nothing but chaos." Evelyn swallowed hard. "And the typewriter?" Helen glanced around the room, as if making sure no one else was listening. "The typewriter was his tool. The confessions. They're part of a bigger plan. Thorne believed that only through exposing the truth could the town be cleansed. But what he didn't realize, what no one realized, was that the truth wasn't something you could control. It's a force, Evelyn. A dangerous one." Evelyn was reeling, trying to make sense of it all. But why are the confessions appearing now? After all these years? Helen shook her head, her face drawn with exhaustion. "Because the time is right. The curse of Westbrook has been dormant for too long. And you are the key, Evelyn. The town's sins are tied to your bloodline. Your father knew this, which is why he tried to stop it. But now, it's too late. Evelyn felt her world tilt on its axis. Her father had always kept his distance from the town's past, always warned her not to dig too deep. Was this why? Had Nathan Harper known more than he had let on? Had he too been a victim of this curse? You need to leave Westbrook, Evelyn, Helen whispered urgently. Before it's too late. The typewriter is already claiming you, and once it claims you, there's no escaping. Evelyn left Helen's house with more questions than answers. She couldn't deny the truth in Helen's words. The typewriter, the confessions, and the mysterious Richard Thorne. They were all pieces of a much larger puzzle. But what was the purpose behind it all? What did it want from her? Her thoughts were interrupted when her phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but something told her she had to answer. Evelyn Harper, the voice on the other end said, cold and deliberate. I know what you've found. You're getting too close. If you don't stop now, you'll never leave Westbrook. The line went dead. Evelyn's blood ran cold. Who was this? And how did they know what she had uncovered? The town of Westbrook was beginning to reveal its true face, but Evelyn's investigation was only starting to scratch the surface. With every confession, every revelation, the darkness seemed to grow stronger. Now, Evelyn was more entangled than ever in a web of lies, betrayal, and a curse that had plagued the town for generations. Her bloodline, her family's history, was bound to this dark legacy, and she had no choice but to continue her search for the truth. But the truth was not going to set her free. The phone call had left Evelyn shaken, her hands trembling as she lowered the receiver. The voice on the other end, cold, threatening, seemed to echo in her mind. Who had known what she had discovered? Who had been watching her? She stared out the window of her small apartment, the fog outside pressing against the glass like a wall. The town of Westbrook seemed to hold its breath, as if waiting for something. Evelyn had never felt this way before, like the very air around her was charged, heavy with unseen forces. The more she learned, the more she understood that she wasn't just uncovering the past. She was walking into a trap, a labyrinth designed to ensnare anyone who dared to unravel its secrets. But she couldn't stop now. She couldn't let fear paralyze her. The truth was within her grasp, and whatever consequences came with it, she would face them head on. After all, it was her bloodline, the Harper family, that was at the center of this nightmare. Her father's sudden death, his obsession with the town's dark history, had been a warning. Had he known that something like this would happen? That someone, or something, was waiting for her to uncover the truth? The chilling call had made one thing clear. Whoever had left the message was a part of the web she was unraveling. They knew too much, and Evelyn knew that if she didn't confront them soon, the typewriter's game would be over before she could reach the heart of the mystery. Evelyn couldn't return to the archives. The feeling of being watched was suffocating. She needed to think, to get some clarity. So, she turned to the only place in town where she might find the answers she sought: the Westbrook Library. It was a small building, old, but filled with decades of accumulated knowledge, the remnants of the town's forgotten history. Inside, the air smelled of old paper and dust, and the rows of bookshelves seemed to stretch endlessly. The librarian, Mrs. Weatherby, was a woman who had worked there for as long as Evelyn could remember. A fixture of the town, she knew everything there was to know about Westbrook's past, even if she was reluctant to share it. Evelyn approached the desk, where Mrs. Weatherby sat reading a thick volume of local history. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Weatherby," Evelyn said, trying to sound casual. The librarian looked up, her sharp eyes narrowing slightly as she saw Evelyn. Ah, Evelyn Harper. You're digging into things again, aren't you? You should leave well enough alone, child. There are some things about this town that are better forgotten. Evelyn's heart skipped a beat. Mrs. Weatherby's words sounded strangely ominous, as though they held a hidden warning. I'm just trying to understand what happened all those years ago. The Ross family, Alice Madsen, the disappearances. The old woman sighed deeply, setting the book aside. The past is like a buried treasure, Evelyn. Sometimes it's better left untouched. But you seem determined to dig. I suppose I can't stop you. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. Do you know anything about Richard Thorne? At the mention of his name, Mrs. Weatherby stiffened. Her eyes darted to the shelves around them, as if checking for eavesdroppers. Richard Thorne, she repeated quietly, as though the name itself were dangerous. I knew him, you know. In his youth, he was a charming man, persuasive, almost magnetic. But there was something about him, something unnatural. He had grand ideas about Westbrook, about controlling it, shaping its future. Some say he was just ahead of his time, but I believe he tapped into something dark, something the town wasn't meant to know. Evelyn leaned forward. What do you mean? Mrs. Weatherby's gaze dropped to her hands, fingers trembling slightly. Thorne was obsessed with the town's history, its legacy. He believed that if the past could be rewritten, the future could be controlled. He tried to manipulate people, to coerce them into doing his bidding. But the town fought back. It has a life of its own, Evelyn. The land, the buildings, the very air we breathe. It all carries the weight of the sins committed here. And Thorne tried to bend it to his will. Did he succeed? Evelyn asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The librarian shook her head slowly. No, he didn't. Not fully. But he left behind the typewriter. It was his tool, his instrument of control. And when he disappeared, it became something else, something more, malevolent. Evelyn felt a chill creep up her spine. What happened to him? Mrs. Weatherby's lips pressed together in a thin line. No one really knows. He vanished without a trace, as though the town swallowed him whole. Some say he was taken by the same forces he tried to control. Others believe he's still here, lurking in the shadows. The typewriter was his last gift to Westbrook, a gift that has never stopped working. Evelyn left the library with more questions than answers, her mind spinning. Every step she took seemed to echo with the weight of the town's dark past, a past that refused to stay buried. And as the fog thickened around her, the feeling of being watched returned. She made her way back to the mill, feeling as though the very ground beneath her feet was alive, pulsing with a quiet, malevolent energy. There, waiting in the same corner as before, sat the typewriter. It was silent now, as though it had been expecting her. Evelyn's heart pounded in her chest as she approached. She could feel the air growing colder, the shadows deepening. She hesitated for a moment, but then, compelled by something she couldn't explain, she reached for the typewriter. Her fingers brushed against the cold keys, and with that simple touch, it began again. Clack, clack, clack. The paper feed turned, and the machine began typing once more. Evelyn watched, breathless, as the words appeared before her. I, Richard Thorne, confess to all the sins of this town. I twisted its people. I led them astray. I manipulated them into dark deeds, and I believed that I could control the outcome. But I was wrong. Westbrook is not just a town. It is a living thing, and it has its own will. Evelyn's heart stopped. Richard Thorne, his confession. But something about it felt different this time, as if it wasn't just a confession, it was a command, A warning. The Curse of Westbrook is not a story. It is not a legend. It is a reality. And you, Evelyn Harper, are the final piece. You have awakened it. You have set it free. There is no escaping it. You are part of it now. The sins of your bloodline are bound to this place, and they will never be undone. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. The typewriter clacked to a stop, and the paper sat there, blank now, like a taunt. The confession was over, but the words lingered in her mind, like the echo of a death knell. Westbrook's curse was not just something from the past. It was a force, alive, waiting for the right moment to strike. And it was no longer just a town of forgotten memories. It was a place of power, of manipulation, and of something far darker than she had ever imagined. Her family's connection to it was deeper than she realized. And now, the past was coming for her. Evelyn left the mill, her mind reeling. The words from Richard Thorne's confession had taken root in her heart. The curse wasn't just about exposing the past. It was about control. And now that she was part of the story, she couldn't run from it. She couldn't hide. She had to finish what her father started. She had to uncover the truth about Richard Thorne, about the typewriter, and about the true nature of Westbrook's legacy. And she had to do it before the town swallowed her whole. The fog was thicker now, wrapping around Westbrook like an oppressive cloak. Evelyn could feel it closing in on her as she walked through the town, the weight of the confessions and Richard Thorne's final words hanging heavily on her shoulders. She couldn't escape what she had become a part of. No matter how much she tried to deny it, Westbrook's curse had claimed her. But Evelyn refused to back down. Her father had tried to protect her from the darkness, and now she had to finish what he had started. He had known something. He had fought against this curse in his own way. But now it was her turn. She had to end it. That night, as the clock struck midnight, she returned to the mill. The typewriter waited for her, as if it had been expecting her arrival. The room was colder than before, the shadows more pronounced. Every step she took felt heavier, as though the very air was pressing against her, urging her to stop, to turn away. But Evelyn knew there was no turning back. The moment she stepped into the room, the typewriter shuddered to life. The keys clicked, the paper feed moved, and the haunting sound of the machine began again. It was as though it was trying to pull her into the past, to make her relive the horrors it had witnessed. Clack, clack, clack. The words began to form. Evelyn Harper, you have come to understand your place in all this, haven't you? You've learned of Richard Thorne and his machinations. You've uncovered the confessions, but you still don't understand the true nature of your bloodline. Evelyn's hands gripped the edge of the desk, her heart pounding in her chest. She was no longer afraid. She couldn't afford to be. The Harpers were never just a family, Evelyn. Your bloodline is tied to the foundation of this town. Your ancestors were the ones who made the deal with the forces that shaped Westbrook's destiny. They struck a bargain, a pact that would keep the town prosperous, but at a terrible cost. And now, that cost must be paid. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. A pact? What did that mean? She had always thought her family was just another piece of the town's history. But this was something else entirely. The curse you speak of, the one you think was birthed by Richard Thorne, began long before him. He only awoke it. And now it is your turn to complete what he started. Your father tried to resist. He failed. But you must finish what he began. Evelyn felt her stomach twist into knots. Her father hadn't just been trying to protect her from the past. He had been fighting against it, fighting against the very legacy of the Harper family. He had known. He had tried to stop the curse from claiming her, but it was too late. The typewriter wasn't just an instrument of confession. It was a part of the curse, a force that sought to manipulate, to control, and to ensure that the sins of the past could never be escaped. Clack, clack, clack. The final confession is yours, Evelyn Harper. It's your turn to confess, to reveal your true role in the darkness that binds Westbrook. It's time to make your choice. The last words echoed through the room, a chilling command that sent a shiver down her spine. What choice? She had already made her decision. She was going to end this. She had no choice but to confront the truth of her bloodline and the legacy that tied her to the curse. Evelyn stood in the center of the mill, the typewriter's relentless clacking echoing around her. Her mind raced, piecing together the fragments of what she had learned. The pact, the curse, her family's role in it, everything she had uncovered had led her to this moment. But there was one final question that lingered in her mind. What was the cost of breaking the curse? She needed answers. She needed to know what had really happened all those years ago when the town had been founded. Evelyn made her way to the Old Town Cemetery, where the founders of Westbrook were buried. The tombstones were worn, their names faded with time, but Evelyn knew where to look. She had to find the truth, and she knew that the key to everything lay in the forgotten graves of the town's founders. In the farthest corner of the cemetery, she found it. A small, weathered stone with no name, just a date carved into it. The date was centuries old, but it was the only one that didn't belong. The rest were all from the late 1800s, but this one was older, much older. Evelyn crouched down, brushing away the dirt and moss. There, carved into the stone, were the words she had been looking for. The pact of the founders will last for eternity. The price will be paid by the bloodline of the Harpers. Only when the final confession is made will the curse be broken. Evelyn's heart raced. The words were clear. The Harpers were the key to everything. The pact that had been made long ago was never meant to be broken, not until the final confession had been made. And now, it was her turn. The town was alive with a sense of impending doom. The fog had crept into every corner, and the silence that hung over Westbrook felt suffocating. Evelyn knew that the curse was no longer just a haunting tale. It was a living, breathing force that was waiting to claim her. She returned to the mill one final time, the typewriter waiting for her, as if it had been holding its breath, waiting for this moment. As she approached, the machine shuddered to life once more, its keys rattling, as though it were eager to finish its task. This time, the words that appeared on the page weren't just confessions, they were a command. Evelyn Harper, the time has come. The curse is upon you. You must confess your role in the bloodline's sins, or the town will fall to darkness. You are the last of your family, and the price must be paid. Evelyn closed her eyes. She had learned everything she needed to know. The typewriter, the confessions, the curse. It was all part of a cycle that had started long before her. Her family's bloodline was bound to this town, and she had to make a choice: continue the cycle or break it once and for all. The room grew colder, the shadows deeper, as though the very walls were closing in on her. She could feel the presence of something ancient, something malevolent, waiting for her to make her decision. And then, with a final resolute breath, Evelyn sat down at the typewriter. Her fingers hovered over the keys. The words she needed to write were already in her heart. The confession was not just an admission, it was a release, a final severing of the ties that bound her to the town. Her fingers began to type. I, Evelyn Harper, confess to the sins of my ancestors. I confess to the pact that was made, to the bloodline that was cursed. I am the last of the Harpers, and I release this town from the darkness that has bound it for centuries. As the final words appeared on the page, a blinding light filled the room. The typewriter clacked one last time and fell silent. The air in the mill grew still, and for the first time, Evelyn felt the weight of the town's curse lift. The fog that had clung to Westbrook seemed to dissipate, and the oppressive darkness that had held the town in its grip for so long began to recede. Evelyn stood up, her hands trembling, but her heart at peace. She had done it. The curse had been broken. But at what cost? The town of Westbrook slowly began to change. The fog that had once smothered the streets lifted, revealing a clearer sky. The whispers that had haunted the townspeople seemed to fade, and in the quiet, there was a sense of rebirth. But Evelyn knew that while the curse had been broken, the scars of the past would never fully disappear. The town had been freed, but its history was written in the bloodline of the Harpers. The legacy of Westbrook would never truly be erased. It had been a part of her, is a part of her. As she walked away from the mill, Evelyn looked back one last time. The typewriter was gone. The confessions were finished, and she was free. In Pinebrook, a sleepy town nestled between towering pines and mist-covered hills, the disappearance of Emma Sinclair was a disturbance that rippled through every corner of the community. Emma was 24 years old, a woman with a soft smile, a shy demeanor, and a life that seemed, to the outside world, to be uncomplicated. Her family was well regarded in the town, though they had long ago retreated from the public eye, moving into the sprawling old mansion that had once been the pride of the town's elite. Her disappearance was subtle, almost imperceptible at first. One evening, she simply vanished. Her car remained parked outside her small apartment. Her phone was left on the kitchen counter, and no signs of a struggle were found. The police found no evidence of foul play, and at first, it seemed as if Emma had just gone away, voluntarily perhaps, to escape some unknown burden. But the townsfolk knew better. Emma had no reason to disappear. She had no significant enemies, no debts, no broken relationships. She was quiet, yes, but loved by everyone who knew her. Her absence made no sense. For months, the search continued. The investigation seemed to stall, and the town began to return to its normal, tranquil rhythm. Yet, a part of Pinebrook's heart had been ripped out. The face of the young woman was still missing from the local diner's missing persons board. Her absence felt by everyone, but few spoke about it aloud. It wasn't until 6 months later, when Emma's childhood friend, Lucy, visited the Sinclair estate to help clean out some of the old rooms, that anything resembling a breakthrough occurred. In the attic, hidden beneath a trapdoor, Lucy discovered a box of old memorabilia, letters, photographs, and journals that had belonged to Emma as a young girl. Among the mementos was a leather-bound diary, worn with age. It was Emma's childhood diary, a relic from her teenage years. But the pages that remained were different. The ink had faded over the years, but one thing remained clear. "I am not me." The phrase was written again and again, at first appearing innocent, even like a frustrated teenage thought. But as Lucy continued flipping through the pages, she realized that the sentence had consumed much of the diary. The final entry, scribbled furiously at the end of the book, was nothing but these words, written in erratic, almost panicked handwriting. "I am not me. I will never be me again." Lucy, confused and worried, contacted the authorities. She sent the diary to the police, and though they attempted to investigate, the message remained elusive. The repeating phrase had no obvious meaning, and no one knew what to make of it. Was it a cry for help, a sign of mental instability, or something more? The case was reopened, but it was soon deemed yet another dead end. As the case went cold once again, a surprising call came to the Pine Brook Police Department. Anna Graves, a private investigator from the city, had reached out with an unusual offer to help with Emma's case. Anna's background as a former detective made her more than qualified, but what truly struck the police was Anna's connection to the case. She was, in fact, a former resident of Pine Brook. Though Anna had left the town years ago after a difficult childhood, her family was tied to the Sinclair legacy in strange, unexpected ways. The Graves family and the Sinclairs had been close neighbors and business partners, their histories intertwined in a web of shared wealth and secrets. Anna had left Pine Brook behind long ago, but something about Emma's story called her back. Perhaps it was the eerie similarities between Emma's life and her own troubled past. Or perhaps, Anna thought, she just wanted to bury the ghosts of her childhood once and for all. When Anna arrived in Pine Brook, she felt the weight of the town's oppressive silence. The streets that had once felt familiar now seemed foreign to her. It was as if the town itself had frozen in time, locked in an era that had never fully gone away. Everything felt too perfect, too controlled, as if the whole place was holding its breath, waiting for something or someone to finally reveal its secrets. Her first stop was Emma's family estate. The Sinclair mansion loomed at the edge of town, a decaying structure hidden behind layers of overgrown ivy and thick forest. The house had once been a symbol of Pine Brook's wealth and status, but now it was just another relic of the past. Anna approached the front door, a knot of unease tightening in her stomach. Her memories of the house were dim. She hadn't been there since she was a child, visiting with her parents, but the house had always felt oppressive. There were rumors that the mansion held more than just dust and cobwebs, that something sinister had happened within its walls. The estate was silent when Anna arrived. The front door creaked when she pushed it open. It was clear that no one had been there for months. But as she walked through the rooms, there was an unmistakable sense of presence, a lingering energy, as though the house had a life of its own. Anna found herself drawn to the attic, the same place where Lucy had discovered the diary. As she sifted through the old boxes, she found more than just keepsakes. She found clues, scraps of letters, old photographs, and symbols that seemed completely out of place. There were mentions of secret meetings, an ancient society that had once held control over the town, and cryptic notes written in a hurried hand. It became clear that Emma had discovered something tied to her family's past. But the most unsettling discovery came when Anna stumbled upon an old map of Pine Brook, dated back more than a century. On the map, there was a symbol, a strange, circular sigil that seemed to mark several key locations in town, including the Sinclair estate, the cemetery, and the town square. Anna's breath caught in her throat. She had seen this symbol before, hidden in Emma's diary. The deeper Anna delved into the town's history, the more she uncovered about the Sinclair family's involvement in a secret society, an influential group that had shaped Pine Brook's fate for generations. The society had been founded long ago, tied to ancient rituals that involved manipulation of identity and memory. Emma, it seemed, had uncovered the truth, and it had cost her. As Anna continued her investigation, she grew more and more convinced that Emma's disappearance was no accident. The deeper she dug into the Sinclair family's history, the more she realized that Emma hadn't just disappeared, she had been erased. The society that controlled Pinebrook was not merely a group of wealthy elites. They were involved in much darker practices. They had been using the town and its people for decades, manipulating memories, identities, and lives. Anna discovered that the society had long held power over the residents, forcing them to forget their pasts, to erase their true selves, and take on new identities. The shocking truth was that Emma wasn't the first. There had been others, people whose names had been erased from history, their existence scrubbed clean. The town itself was built on a lie, a carefully curated illusion of normalcy. Anna's discoveries began to take their toll. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, that someone, something, was following her every move. She'd always been a skeptic, but now, even she couldn't deny the eerie presence that seemed to surround her. As she dug deeper into the town's history, she stumbled upon a letter, written in Emma's hand, hidden in a locked drawer in the Sinclair mansion. It was a desperate cry for help, an admission that Emma had found something too dangerous to ignore. They want to make me one of them, but I'm not them. I will not be forgotten. I will not lose myself like they did. It was clear now. Emma hadn't just stumbled upon a dark secret. She had uncovered something that threatened the very foundation of Pinebrook, and it seemed that someone was trying to keep her quiet, permanently. The weight of Anna's discoveries pressed on her mind like a heavy stone, and as she stood in the Sinclair mansion's library, she realized how little she truly knew about her own past. Emma's diary had opened a door to a world Anna never thought she'd enter again. A world of lies, deceit, and long-hidden truths that had been buried under the seemingly perfect facade of Pinebrook. She sat down at a desk, the dim light from the old lamps casting eerie shadows around her. The town's history was like a puzzle, one that she had only just begun to piece together. The secret society, which had been operating for generations, was far more powerful and far-reaching than anyone could have imagined. Anna now knew that they weren't just controlling the Sinclair family. They were the architects of Pinebrook itself. Their influence extended beyond just money or power. They controlled memories, identities, and the very essence of who people were. Anna's heart raced as she skimmed through more of the documents she'd found hidden in Emma's bedroom, carefully hidden within the walls of the old house. The more she read, the more she saw that Emma had been part of something terrifyingly big. Not only had Emma uncovered the town's secrets, but she had been a part of them. Emma's family had been involved in the society for generations, and it seemed Emma had discovered that she wasn't even Emma Sinclair at all. The real Emma had died years ago, and the woman who had grown up in Pinebrook, the one everyone knew and loved, had been part of a long line of people whose identities had been artificially created. Her disappearance wasn't just about running away. It was about escaping the truth, the horrific, terrifying truth that she was just another piece in a long line of false identities created by a group that ruled Pinebrook with an iron fist. As Anna sat there, digesting the pages of evidence she had painstakingly uncovered, something in the house creaked, just as it had the night she first arrived. This time, it felt different. The house had a sense of malevolence to it, as though it had been waiting for her all along, hoping she would uncover the truth. But the question now gnawed at Anna's mind. If Emma was just another fabricated identity, then who was Anna herself? Could she too be part of the society's grand plan? Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. Anna opened the door to find a man standing in the shadows, his face obscured by the low light. He was tall, with graying hair, and his eyes gleamed with a quiet, unsettling intensity. "Anna Graves," the man said, his voice cold but not unfriendly. "I've been waiting for you." Anna instinctively stepped back. There was something about him that made her uneasy, something she couldn't quite place. He didn't introduce himself, but his presence alone made it clear that he wasn't just some curious bystander. "What do you want?" Anna asked, her voice steady, despite the growing sense of danger that crept up her spine. "I'm here to help you," the man said. "But you have to understand, Anna. You're already in too deep. The town knows you're here. The society is aware of your investigation, and they won't stop until you've been silenced, just like Emma." Anna's heart skipped a beat. She didn't believe him. "I don't need your help." "You might think that," the man replied, his eyes narrowing slightly. "But I know what you're looking for. You think you're chasing ghosts, but they're real. Emma's diary was just the tip of the iceberg. The truth goes much deeper." Anna's pulse quickened. "Who are you?" The man's lips curled into a half smile. "Call me Samuel, and I've been watching you, Anna. I've been following your investigation. You're getting too close to the truth. They won't let you walk away from this." Anna felt a chill run down her spine. "What do you want from me?" "I'm here to offer you a choice," Samuel said softly. "You can walk away. You can leave this town and forget everything you've uncovered. Or you can stay and face the consequences." Anna's mind raced. The pieces of the puzzle were almost complete. She had already seen the clues pointing to the dark secrets of Pinebrook. But if Samuel was telling the truth, and something told her he was, it meant that the society had been watching her every move. She had already seen how far they were willing to go to protect their secrets. Could she really just walk away? "And if I don't leave?" Anna asked. Samuel stepped forward, his expression now unreadable. "Then you'll understand why Emma disappeared, and why you can never truly leave this town, Anna. You're part of their plan now. You always have been." The air felt heavy as Anna considered his words. She thought about the diaries, the hidden truths in Pinebrook, and the society's control over the town. She couldn't walk away now. She had to finish what she started. "I'm not leaving," Anna said firmly. Samuel's eyes softened, but there was no warmth in his gaze. He knew that Anna was too far in. There was no turning back. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small folded piece of paper. "Then, you'll need this." Anna took the paper and unfolded it, only to find a map. An old map of Pinebrook, the same one she had seen earlier, but now marked with an additional, hidden location. This place was different from the others marked on the map. It was located deep in the forest, far from the town. The symbol on the map, the one she'd seen in Emma's diary, now appeared clearer than ever before. "Where is this?" Anna asked, holding the map tightly. Samuel paused, his voice low. "That's the heart of it all. The place where the society was born. You go there, and you'll find the answers you seek. But I warn you, nothing you find there will be what you expect." Anna hesitated. Every fiber of her being told her that this was a mistake, that going to this hidden location was like walking into the lion's den. But she had no choice. She had already come too far. "Why should I trust you?" Anna asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Samuel's expression remained unreadable. "You don't have to trust me, but you'll need to trust yourself. Trust that you're ready to face the truth, no matter what it is." With that, he turned and disappeared into the night, leaving Anna standing alone with the map in her hands. Anna took a deep breath, summoning every ounce of courage she had left. Tomorrow, she would go to the place marked on the map. Tomorrow, she would face whatever truths Pinebrook was hiding. The following day, Anna packed what little she needed: a flashlight, her phone, and the map. She had no intention of returning to the Sinclair estate after tonight. She had to get to the heart of this mystery, no matter the cost. Pinebrook had secrets that no one was meant to uncover, and now she was about to learn the most terrifying truth of all. As she ventured into the woods surrounding Pinebrook, the fog grew thicker, and the trees seemed to close in around her. The path was rugged and uneven, but Anna pushed forward, the map guiding her steps. Her heart pounded in her chest, and every crack of a branch or rustle of leaves made her jump. After what felt like hours of hiking, Anna finally arrived at her destination. A clearing opened up before her, a small stone building hidden in the heart of the woods, overgrown with ivy and surrounded by ancient trees. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and decay. The building was small, barely noticeable, but there was something about it that sent a chill down Anna's spine. She stepped forward, her heart racing. This was the place, the heart of Pinebrook's darkness. Anna's breath caught as she pushed open the weathered door. Inside, the air was stale, and the dim light revealed stone walls covered with strange symbols. In the center of the room was a large, circular stone altar, covered in dust and cobwebs. But on the altar was something that made Anna's blood run cold. It was a book, a leather-bound tome, old and weathered, lying on the altar as if waiting for her. Anna reached out and opened the book. The pages were blank, until the words began to appear, as if by magic. "I am not me." As the words appeared on the pages, Anna felt a wave of nausea crash over her. She staggered back, eyes wide, as the book seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy. The room around her seemed to warp, and the symbols on the walls began to glow faintly. Anna's breathing grew shallow as the words on the page changed, taking on a new form. "You have always been one of us. You just don't remember." The realization hit Anna like a ton of bricks. Emma's words, her diary, the symbols, it all pointed to one undeniable truth. She wasn't just investigating Emma's disappearance. She was Emma. Her mind spun as the memories flooded her. The hidden truths, the false identities, the society that had controlled Pinebrook for generations. She had been erased, just like Emma. Anna Graves wasn't a real person. She was part of the society's plan. She had always been part of it. In a daze, Anna turned and fled the stone building. She didn't look back as the fog closed in around her, the symbols on the walls, and the words in the book echoing in her mind. The truth had been buried deep within her all along. She was never Anna Graves. She was Emma Sinclair. Anna, or rather Emma, never returned to Pinebrook. The town never spoke of her again, as if she had never existed. Her name was erased, just as the society had done to so many others before her. Pinebrook continued on, untouched by the horrors hidden in its history. But for those who knew the truth, the echoes of Emma Sinclair's life and the secrets of Pinebrook would never be forgotten. The town's grip on its residents remained strong, and the cycle would continue. Westfield was the kind of town that didn't get much attention. Nestled between rolling hills and quiet streets, it was the type of place where everyone knew everyone. The houses were old but well-maintained, their lawns trimmed neatly, and their porches adorned with flower boxes. The streets were safe, the kind of place where parents let their kids walk to school without worry, and where the most excitement came from the annual summer fair or the Friday night football games. Ella Parker had lived in Westfield her whole life. At 16, she knew the ins and outs of the town like the back of her hand. and babysitting was just another job she'd grown accustomed to. It was supposed to be a routine night, babysitting for the McAllister family, a family she had known for years. Mia McAllister, the youngest of three, was a sweet, quiet girl who had always been easy to look after. Tonight, though, there was something different about the way Mia was acting. The evening had started normally enough. Mia had been playing quietly with her toys in the living room, while Ella settled in with a book. Her parents, Aaron and Claire McAllister, had left for a dinner party, as they always did on Friday nights, leaving Ella to watch over their daughter. As the evening progressed, Mia began to grow quieter. Ella attributed it to the late hour. Mia had a tendency to get sleepy early. But then, just before bedtime, Mia did something that caught Ella off guard. "Mia, it's time for bed," Ella said, looking up from her book. Mia didn't move. She was sitting on the floor, facing the corner, her eyes wide and unblinking. "Mia?" Ella asked again, a little concerned. "What's wrong?" Mia's head tilted slowly to the side, and she whispered, her voice unnaturally calm for a child her age. "I know what happened to the others." Ella frunció el ceño. "What do you mean, the others?" Mia's eyes flicked toward her, her lips curling into a faint smile. "The others. The ones who were here before. They didn't leave." Ella's skin prickled. The way Mia said it, it didn't sound like the words of a 7-year-old. The tone, the knowing look in her eyes, it made Ella's stomach tighten with unease. "Mia, what are you talking about?" Ella asked, her voice wavering slightly as her heart started to race. She had babysat Mia many times, but never had she heard her say anything so strange. Mia had always been a sweet and innocent child. This wasn't like her at all. Mia didn't answer. Instead, she stood up slowly, her gaze fixed on the wall in front of her. Ella tried to shake off the feeling that was growing in her chest. Fear, confusion. She took a step closer to Mia. "Are you feeling okay?" Ella asked, her voice soft. But as she spoke, a strange noise came from somewhere deep inside the house. A scraping sound, like something dragging against the floor, followed by what sounded like footsteps. Ella se congeló. She couldn't explain it, but the house felt wrong, as if it was closing in around her. The walls felt too tight, the air too thick. She took another step toward Mia, who was still staring at the wall, her body rigid. "Ella," Mia whispered, her voice barely audible. Ella se arrodilló a su lado, su respiración superficial. "What is it, Mia?" "They're inside." Ella's heart stopped. The blood drained from her face. She glanced toward the door, the hallway, trying to locate the source of the sound, but everything was still. The house was silent once again, except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the wall clock. "They're inside?" Ella repitió, su voz temblaba. "Who's inside, Mia?" "What do you mean?" Mia slowly turned her head to look at Ella, her expression blank and unblinking. "They're waiting. They won't leave." Ella se alejó. El terror reptante se enrollaba en su pecho. She stood up, her eyes darting around the room as she heard another sound. This time, it was unmistakable. A soft tapping, as if someone, or something, was moving around in the walls. Her pulse quickened. Without thinking, she rushed to the kitchen and grabbed her phone. Her hands were shaking as she dialed 911, trying to steady her breath. The operator answered on the first ring. 911, what's your emergency? Please, Ella whispered, her voice barely above a frantic whisper. I think someone's inside the house. I'm babysitting. The little girl, Mia McAllister. I think they're inside. Please, they're here. She could hear her voice breaking, but the terror inside her only grew. The sounds in the house were growing louder, closer. Whoever, or whatever, was in the house. It wasn't a figment of her imagination. She could feel it. Something was wrong. It was as if the house itself had become alive. "Calm down, miss," the 911 operator said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Can you tell me what's happening?" "They're inside. I don't know what it is, but..." Ella's breath hitched as she heard footsteps above her, loud and deliberate. She glanced up, her body stiff with fear. "Please, they're coming down the stairs. I'm locked in, but they're inside. Please, send someone." "Are you in immediate danger? Can you get to a safe place?" the operator asked. Ella felt tears sting her eyes, but she tried to stay focused. "I'm in the living room. Mia's in her room. They're in the walls. I hear them. She was cut off as the phone went dead. The silence that followed was suffocating. Ella's head spun as the phone call ended abruptly. Panic swelled in her chest, but she forced herself to take steady breaths, trying to remain calm. The sounds had stopped, but the unsettling presence in the house remained. The house seemed to be holding its breath, waiting. She looked toward the stairs, every instinct in her body screaming for her to run. But she couldn't leave Mia, not after everything that had happened. Ella moved cautiously toward Mia's room, her footsteps muffled by the plush carpet. She reached the door, knocking softly before opening it. Mia was sitting on her bed, her back to Ella. She didn't acknowledge Ella's presence, but her head turned slowly, just enough for Ella to see the empty, unblinking stare. "Mia?" Ella asked, her voice trembling. Mia's lips parted. "They won't leave." Ella's pulse quickened as she crossed the room, kneeling beside the bed. "Mia, it's going to be okay. I've called the police. They're on their way." But before Mia could respond, the sound of sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Ella's heart skipped a beat. The sirens got closer, and in a blur of red and blue lights, the front door was flung open. 2 uniformed officers rushed inside, their eyes scanning the darkened living room as they moved quickly, clearing the house room by room. Ella was still standing in the doorway of Mia's room, her body frozen in place. The officers quickly came to her side. "Are you all right, miss?" one of them asked, his voice calm but firm. I don't know," Ella whispered. "I heard things. I don't know what happened." The officers exchanged glances before one of them moved toward Mia's bed. "Is this the child you're babysitting?" Ella assentiu. "Yes, that's Mia." The officer bent down to Mia's level, but as he did, Mia's eyes snapped to his, and for a brief moment, a shudder ran through her body. "Miss," the officer said, glancing back at Ella, "there's nothing here. No signs of forced entry. The house is locked up tight from the inside. Everything seems normal." Ella's heart sank. There's something wrong. I heard the footsteps, the tapping. I heard them." The officer shook his head, his voice gentle but firm. "There's no one here, miss. The house is clear." As the officers left, unable to find any trace of an intruder, Ella felt a rising sense of unease. The night had been too strange, too terrifying. Later, as she sat in the kitchen, the adrenaline slowly draining from her body, Ella tried to make sense of what had happened. The police had found no evidence of anyone breaking into the house. No signs of forced entry, no footprints, no fingerprints. It was as if nothing had happened at all. But Ella knew what she heard. She had heard footsteps, noises, things that couldn't have come from her imagination. And Mia was different now. As Ella sat there, her mind racing, Mia appeared in the doorway, her face pale, her eyes hollow. She didn't say a word as she slowly walked over to Ella, her steps eerily quiet. "Mia," Ella said, her voice shaky. "What happened?" Mia looked up at her, her lips curling into a strange, knowing smile. "You don't remember, do you?" she whispered, her voice impossibly calm. "But they're still here, Ella. They've always been here." Ella's blood ran cold as Mia's words echoed in the back of her mind. The house had secrets, and Ella had just uncovered the first of them. The next morning, Ella couldn't shake the feeling of dread that had settled in her chest. Her usual routine of getting ready for school felt hollow, as though the normalcy of the day was somehow a lie. Every sound, every movement, felt like a reminder of the terrifying events of the previous night. She couldn't just let it go. Mia's strange behavior, the noises, the inexplicable silence from the police, it all felt wrong. As she gathered her things for school, Ella couldn't stop thinking about what Mia had whispered to her. "They've always been here." What did that mean? Who were they? And why had Mia seemed so detached and eerie when she spoke? Mia was never like that. She was always so sweet, so innocent. The more Ella replayed the events in her mind, the more she realized that something was deeply wrong with the McAllister house. The house itself had always felt odd, almost as if it were too quiet at times, as if it were holding its breath. But last night, it had felt alive. By the time Ella walked to school, her mind was buzzing with unanswered questions. She needed to know more. She couldn't go on pretending like everything was fine. That afternoon, Ella skipped her last class and made her way to the Westfield Public Library. It was a quiet old building with creaky floors and rows of dusty books, the kind of place that smelled like aged paper and ink. She had been here countless times before, but today she had a different purpose. Ella made her way to the local history section and pulled out a few dusty volumes on the history of Westfield. She knew she was grasping at straws, but the odd feeling she had about the McAllister house, it wasn't just paranoia. There had to be something there, something hidden beneath the surface. She spent hours combing through old records, microfilm newspapers, and local legends, but it wasn't until she reached a particular binder, tucked away in the farthest corner of the library, that she found something that made her blood run cold. A series of articles and journal entries from the late 1800s detailed strange occurrences in Westfield, most notably around the McAllister family's estate. The first few entries were innocuous enough, talking about the family's wealth and status, but as she read on, things started to take a darker turn. One article from 1885 described the sudden disappearance of two young women who had been hired to babysit the McAllister children. There were no signs of foul play, just a complete vanishing. The same thing happened again in 1910 and in the 1930s. Each time, the police investigation turned up nothing, no trace of the missing babysitters, but there was something else, something more unsettling. As Ella flipped through the pages, she found a journal entry from a local historian, someone who had been researching the town's dark past. The entry described a ritual that had been performed in the McAllister family home, a ritual believed to have been connected to the house's very foundation. According to the historian, the McAllisters had been cursed, and every generation was marked by a tragedy. Someone from the family would go missing, or worse, would be taken. The ritual was meant to tie the family to some ancient, unknowable force. The final sentence of the journal entry made Ella's stomach churn. And as for the McAllister house, it remains a prison of sorts, its inhabitants bound by an old curse, and those who serve them, like the babysitters, become its vessels. Ella's hands trembled as she closed the binder. A curse? A ritual? The idea seemed insane, but the pattern was clear. Every babysitter had vanished, disappeared without a trace, just like Mia's strange words from the night before. They won't leave. The next day after school, Ella went straight to the McAllister house, hoping to speak to Mia. Something was terribly wrong, and she couldn't ignore it anymore. She needed to understand what was happening, not just to Mia, but to the entire family. When she arrived, she knocked twice on the door, waiting for an answer. After a moment, the door creaked open slightly. Claire McAllister, Mia's mother, stood there with a forced smile. Her eyes seemed weary, and she looked at Ella as though she hadn't slept in days. "Ella," Claire said, her voice strained. "I wasn't expecting you. Is everything all right?" Ella tried to keep her voice steady. "I was just wondering if I could talk to Mia. Is she all right? I'm worried about her." Claire hesitated for a moment, then stepped aside to let Ella in. "Mia's in her room," Claire said quietly. "But she hasn't been herself lately. I don't know what's going on with her." Ella nodded, feeling a tightness in her chest. She needed to get to the bottom of this. She couldn't leave until she understood what was happening. As she climbed the stairs to Mia's room, she noticed a strange stillness in the house. The air was unnaturally quiet, as though even the house itself was holding its breath. Mia's door was slightly ajar, and when Ella entered, she was taken aback. Mia was sitting on the floor, staring into space. She was rocking back and forth slowly, her fingers playing with a string of beads, her face blank. The room felt colder than it should be, a chill that seemed to come from nowhere. "Mia?" Ella llamó suavemente, avanzando. Mia's head snapped up so quickly that Ella nearly jumped back in surprise. Her eyes. There was something wrong with her eyes. They weren't the bright, innocent eyes Ella had known. They were wide and glassy, as if something had taken the life out of her. "They're inside," Mia whispered again, her voice unnaturally calm. "And they're waiting for you." Ella se tragó con fuerza, tratando de estabilizar su respiración. "Mia, listen to me. I need to know what happened. What do you mean? Who's inside? Who's waiting?" Mia's lips curled into a strange, almost knowing smile, and she stood up slowly, her movements jerky. She approached Ella, her small hand reaching out. "You're part of it now," Mia said, her voice a whisper that sent a shiver down Ella's spine. "It's too late to leave. You belong to them, just like the others before you." Ella stumbled backward, her heart pounding. She grabbed Mia's shoulders, shaking her slightly. "No, Mia, you have to tell me what's going on. I know you're scared. You're not like this. Please tell me what's happening." Mia's eyes narrowed, her smile growing wider. "The house chooses who stays and who goes." Her voice dropped to a barely audible whisper. "You can't leave. They won't let you." Before Ella could respond, a sudden loud bang echoed through the house, followed by the sound of someone, scraping against the walls. The lights flickered and then went out, plunging the house into darkness. Ella's breath caught in her throat. The feeling of being trapped, the feeling that something was moving in the shadows, something unseen, but very much present, grew stronger. The walls of the house seemed to close in around her. "Ella," Mia whispered again, her voice coming from the darkness. "They've come for you." Ella se fue de la habitación, su corazón latía con fuerza. She didn't know what was happening, but it was too much to ignore anymore. The entire house seemed alive, as if it were watching her, breathing with her. The walls felt like they were closing in on her, and the strange noises continued to echo through the house. She couldn't tell if it was the house itself making the noise, or if it was something else entirely. She ran down the hallway, heading for the stairs. As she reached the top of the staircase, she saw something that made her blood run cold. The faint glow of eyes in the darkness at the bottom of the stairs. They were watching her. She froze, her feet rooted to the spot. A voice, low and guttural, whispered from the dark, "You cannot escape." Ella's heart pounded in her chest as she stood at the top of the stairs, paralyzed by fear. The eerie glow from the bottom of the stairs seemed to pulse with life, like the very house was alive, watching her every move. The voice, thick with something ancient and dark, echoed through the halls, making the air feel heavier. "You cannot escape." Her legs felt like they were made of stone, unable to move. Sweat trickled down the back of her neck. Every fiber of her being screamed for her to run, but her body wouldn't obey. It was as if the house had ensnared her, its power locking her in place. The glow at the bottom of the stairs flickered, and a figure stepped into the light. It was Mia. But this wasn't the Mia Ella knew. Her eyes were wide and vacant, glowing faintly in the dark. Her face twisted into something that was almost a smile, but not quite. "Mia?" Ella susurró, "Su voz apenas un sonido." "What's happening?" Mia didn't respond. Instead, she began to slowly ascend the stairs, her steps deliberate and unnatural. With every step, Ella felt the weight of the house pressing in on her. It felt suffocating, like the walls themselves were closing in. "Please, Mia, talk to me. What do you mean I can't escape?" Ella's voice cracked, but Mia didn't seem to hear. She was moving closer now, her eyes locked on Ella with an intensity that made Ella's skin crawl. Then Mia spoke, her voice low and hollow. "It's not about leaving, Ella. It's about belonging." Ella's throat tightened, and she instinctively took a step backward. "Belonging to what?" "Mia, please." The air around them grew colder. A sudden gust of wind blew through the open door at the end of the hall, slamming it shut with a deafening bang. The lights flickered again, casting long shadows across the walls. The sound of something scraping against the floor grew louder, like nails on a chalkboard. Suddenly, everything went still. Mia stopped at the top of the stairs, standing motionless as her eyes continued to glow with an unnatural light. Ella's breath hitched, and her eyes darted to the hallway behind her. It was then that she noticed something that made her stomach lurch. The walls were shifting. The texture of the wood and plaster was warping, stretching, as though something was moving within them. Something alive. Before she could react, the voice came again, this time louder, and it seemed to come from every direction at once. "You are part of it now, Ella. You can never leave." Ella gasped as the figure of Mia stepped toward her, the glow in her eyes intensifying. She could feel a presence behind her, something dark and ancient. The house was alive, feeding on something. On her. "Stop! Stop!" Ella shouted, backing away down the stairs, her legs trembling with fear. "Please, Mia, you have to stop. You're not like this. You're not..." But Mia reached out, her hand cold as ice, her grip tightening around Ella's wrist. "It's too late for you, Ella. You're already one of us." Ella cried out, but as Mia's grip tightened, the world around her seemed to blur. The house seemed to shift, the walls twisting and bending as though they were alive, wrapping around her like tendrils, pulling her in. The darkness was suffocating, and Ella felt her knees buckle under her. But before she could fall, a sudden light filled the room. It was bright and blinding, casting shadows across the hallway. The scraping sound stopped. The presence in the house seemed to retreat, like a shadow being pushed back by the sun. Ella tried to look around, but her vision blurred again. She could hear someone shouting her name, a distant voice cutting through the disorienting noise. "Ella! Ella! Get up!" It was Claire McAllister's voice. Ella blinked, trying to focus, and saw Claire rushing toward her. The light that filled the room seemed to pulse, like the very walls of the house were pushing back against whatever darkness had taken hold. Claire. Ella lloró, intentando pararse, pero sus piernas se sentían débiles. What's happening? What's wrong with Mia? Claire's face was pale, her eyes wide with fear. I don't know, Ella. I don't know what's happening. But you need to get out of here, now. But Mia was still standing there, her hand still outstretched, her eyes glowing in the dark. You can't leave, Ella. They won't let you. Claire turned to look at her daughter, her face filled with sorrow. Mia, she whispered, almost pleading. Mia, please. Mia's lips curled into a twisted smile. It's too late, Mother. She's already part of the house. She's one of them now. Ella's pulse quickened, the words echoing in her head. One of them. Mia, what are you talking about? Ella shouted, stepping away from her, her heart racing. What's going on? What are you? Before Mia could answer, the walls of the house groaned, a deep, guttural sound, as if the entire structure was coming to life. The lights flickered, the air growing colder with each passing second. The house was fighting, but against what? Or who? Claire grabbed Ella by the arm, her grip tight. We need to leave. Now. This house. It's not just a house. It's a prison, and it's holding all of us. The words hit Ella like a punch to the gut. A prison. Was this the curse? The ritual she had read about in the library? She thought she had been running toward the truth, but now she realized the truth was far more terrifying than she had ever imagined. It wants us, Claire continued, her voice shaking. It doesn't just want Mia. It wants everyone who stays here. It wants their souls, their essence, and once it's got them, it doesn't let go. It never lets go. Ella's heart raced. The walls of the house seemed to press in, as if agreeing with Claire's words, and she could feel the floor beneath her trembling. She turned to look at Mia, who was still standing motionless, her eyes unblinking. Mia, please, Ella whispered, her voice desperate. You're not like this. You don't have to be like this. Mia's lips parted again, her voice cold and lifeless. I don't have a choice. None of us do. You never did. Ella's mind raced. She had no idea what was truly happening in this house, but she knew one thing for certain. Mia wasn't the same, and neither was Claire. They were caught in something far beyond their control, something that stretched back through generations. This house was no longer just a building. It was a force, a trap for anyone who entered. And now, Ella was a part of it. She could feel it. The house knew her now. With Claire pulling her toward the door, Ella looked back at Mia one last time. But before she could make it out, the scraping sound grew louder again, this time reverberating from the very walls. It was as though something was trying to break through the floor, clawing its way to the surface. You can't leave, Mia whispered again, her voice softer now, almost a plea. You belong to it now. Ella luchó contra la atracción de la casa, pero la puerta estaba cerrada antes de que ella pudiera actuar, y la luz había desaparecido. The world around her grew dark, suffocating. There was no escape. The door slammed shut behind Ella with a deafening crash, cutting off the only means of escape. The house was alive, breathing, shifting around her. Every creak of the wood, every flicker of the lights felt like a reminder that she was trapped. There was no way out. Not anymore. Claire, still gripping Ella's arm with a surprising strength, pulled her away from the door. We need to go deeper into the house, now. Ella tried to wrench herself free, her panic escalating. No, I can't. What's happening to Mia? What's wrong with her? She turned back to the door, but it was already sealed tightly, the shadows beyond it whispering promises of eternal captivity. Mia's gone, Claire said, her voice trembling, but her eyes were hard. She's not the Mia you know. That thing upstairs, it's not her. It hasn't been for a long time. Ella swallowed hard, the weight of Claire's words sinking in. She wasn't sure if she could trust her. Was this some twisted, sick version of the truth? Or was Claire finally revealing what had really happened all these years? I don't understand, Ella said, her voice desperate, her mind spinning with the impossible reality surrounding her. What do you mean she's gone? You're telling me she's not my Mia? Claire's grip tightened, pulling her down the dark hallway. Mia's soul has been taken, she whispered, but she's still here. You saw it yourself, didn't you? The house controls them. It takes them, twists them. They become something else, but their bodies stay behind, forever. Ella could barely comprehend what she was hearing. Mia's soul? Taken? The air around her seemed to thicken, as though it was becoming more difficult to breathe. The walls of the house felt oppressive, watching, waiting. The temperature in the hallway dropped, and Ella shivered involuntarily. I don't understand, she repeated, but the words sounded hollow. She didn't know who she was asking anymore. Claire? The house? She wasn't sure who could answer her at this point. It's the curse, Claire explained, her voice cracking. Every generation of McAllisters, every babysitter, anyone who stays here, they're taken. It's the price we pay for the power the house gives us. We thought we could control it, but it controls us instead. They reached the staircase at the end of the hall, and Claire hesitated for a moment before pulling Ella toward it. We have to go deeper. There's a room beneath the house. It's the heart of it all. The ritual was performed there. It's where everything started. Ella's heart was racing, her mind a mess of questions and confusion. She had no idea what Claire meant by the heart of it all, but the sense of urgency in Claire's voice made her follow, despite the growing dread in her chest. What would they find down there? Would it explain what had happened to Mia and to the other missing babysitters? As they descended into the darkness, the oppressive air seemed to grow thicker, heavier. The narrow staircase creaked under their weight, and the smell of decay grew stronger with each step. When they reached the bottom, Ella could barely see anything. The only light came from a small, flickering bulb hanging from the ceiling. Claire moved forward, leading the way, her footsteps echoing in the silence. The room at the bottom of the stairs felt cold, ancient, too ancient. And then Ella saw it. The walls were covered in strange symbols, etched deeply into the stone, glowing faintly, as if alive. The air in the room felt heavy, with something, an energy, a force that she couldn't describe. The far corner of the room was the darkest, and Claire hesitated before stepping toward it. This is where it began, she whispered, almost reverently. This is the source. Ella's heart skipped a beat. The source of what? Claire didn't answer right away. Instead, she turned to face Ella, her eyes filled with sorrow. The house is a conduit, Ella, for something ancient, something evil. The curse started here, with a blood ritual, a deal made to keep the McAllister name powerful. Ella's breath caught in her throat. The words felt like a knife to her chest. A blood ritual, a deal with something evil. And every time the house claims a soul, Claire continued, her voice low, it grows stronger. Mia, she's just one of the latest. And now it wants you. Ella stepped back instinctively, her mind spinning. No, I won't let it. I won't be another Another soul! You can't let it happen. Claire's face twisted with regret. I don't want it to happen either. But there's nothing we can do now. It's too late. Ella turned, panic rising in her chest. She looked around the room, desperate for a way out. But the walls seemed to shift, to close in on her. The symbols on the walls were pulsing, as if something inside the house was reacting to her fear. Suddenly, she felt it. A pressure in the air, a weight that seemed to press down on her chest, pushing the breath from her lungs. The temperature dropped sharply, and a low, deep growl filled the room, emanating from the very walls themselves. I told you, a voice hissed from the darkness. You cannot escape. Ella spun around, eyes wild with terror, and saw it. A figure stepped out from the shadows, tall and gaunt, its face obscured by a dark hood. The figure moved with unnatural speed, gliding across the room until it stood before her. Its hands, long and bony, reached for her, and Ella's blood ran cold. It is too late for you. The voice rasped, its tone ancient, malevolent. Ella gasped, stumbling backward, but the figure's grip was quick. It wrapped around her wrist, cold as ice, its touch burning into her skin. No! Ella cried out, struggling to break free. But it was no use. The figure's grip was unyielding. Your soul is mine, the figure whispered. The light in the room flickered, and for a split second, Ella saw Mia's face, her hollow eyes, her twisted smile. But then the figure's grip tightened, and the room seemed to spin out of control. No, Ella whispered again, her heart pounding in her chest. I won't let you take me. With every ounce of strength she had left, she yanked her wrist free from the figure's grasp, her pulse thrumming in her ears. The room seemed to collapse around her. The walls cracked and groaned, as if the house was screaming, trying to hold her in place. Ella stumbled backward, her feet slipping on the cold stone floor. But then Claire was there, grabbing her arm. Ella, we have to leave now. But before they could move, the house shook violently, a tremor that rattled the very foundations. The walls shifted again, and a terrible scream filled the air, the sound of something alive, something ancient, calling out from the depths of the house. And then, as suddenly as it had started, the house fell silent. The silence was deafening. Ella's heart was racing, her breath coming in quick, shallow gasps. The house, the cursed walls, the figure, it all seemed to be waiting, watching. Ella, Claire said, her voice strained. We have to leave. It's not safe here. It never was. But Ella didn't move. She was frozen, her mind racing. Something inside her had shifted, a resolve taking root. She wasn't going to let the house win. She wasn't going to let it claim her, or Mia. No, Ella said firmly, her voice trembling but resolute. I won't leave until I stop it. I won't let it take anyone else. Claire's face twisted with agony, but there was something in her eyes, something that flickered, just for a moment, a hint of understanding, maybe even hope. Ella turned toward the center of the room, her eyes scanning the dark corners. The shadows seemed to shift, as though they were alive. She was done running. She would face whatever this was, and she would end it. Ella stood in the center of the dimly lit room, her heart racing in her chest. The air was thick with the presence of something ancient, something dark. The silence after the tremor was suffocating, and Ella felt the weight of the house pressing in on her from all sides. Claire stood behind her, still holding Ella's arm, her grip tighter now, as if afraid Ella would fall apart at any moment. You don't understand, Ella, Claire said, her voice low and strained. There is no stopping it. You can't fight what's already taken root here. Ella turned, her face set with determination. I'm not going to let it take me, and I won't let it take anyone else either. Not Mia. Not anyone. Claire's eyes widened. You think you can stop it? You think you can fight it? Her voice trembled. You've seen what's happened to Mia, to me, to everyone who's come before us. The house owns us. There's no escaping it. It will take everything from you, and when it's done, you'll be no different than the others. It's part of the curse. It's always been part of the curse. Ella shook her head, fighting the dizziness that seemed to encroach on her vision. She couldn't let herself succumb to despair. She couldn't. If she did, it would be over. For her, for Mia, for everyone who had ever set foot in this cursed house. I'm not like the others, Claire. I won't give up. I won't let it win, she said, her voice stronger now. Claire's face softened, and for a moment, Ella saw the woman she had once known, the one who had always been so kind, so full of life. But it was fleeting. The sorrow in her eyes returned, and she turned away. I don't want you to end up like me, Claire whispered. I don't want you to become part of the house's hunger. But you don't have a choice. You've already made your decision. Before Ella could respond, the room seemed to darken, the air growing heavier by the second. She felt it, the pressure, the sense that something was coming, something powerful. The house was alive, and it was feeding off their fear. Ella's throat tightened, her pulse quickening. Suddenly, a voice echoed through the room, a whisper that sounded like it was coming from all directions at once. You cannot stop it, Ella. You are already ours. The walls groaned, and the symbols on them began to pulse again, glowing brighter, more intense. The air around them seemed to crackle, charged with an unnatural energy. Ella turned to face the source of the voice, but there was nothing, just the oppressive darkness. Mia, Ella susurró, el nombre escapando de sus labios antes de que pudiera detenerlo. Was it Mia speaking, or something else entirely? But there was no response, only the oppressive, suffocating silence. Then, suddenly, the darkness surged forward, and a figure appeared in the center of the room. It wasn't Mia, though it looked like her. The body, yes, but the eyes, those were not Mia's eyes. They were wide, empty, glowing with an unnatural light. The mouth stretched into a cruel, mocking smile. You think you can save her, Ella? The figure sneered, its voice distorted, like it was speaking through layers of static. You think you can stop us? Ella felt her knees weaken, but she steadied herself. I will stop you. I will stop this, no matter what it takes. The figure took a step forward, its movements fluid, unnatural. It was Mia, but not Mia. It was something else entirely, a creature born of the house's hunger, twisted by the curse that had gripped it for generations. You think you can defeat us, but you've already failed, the creature hissed, its voice like dry leaves scraping across the ground. We've been here for centuries. You are just another pawn in our game. Ella's breath caught in her throat, but she didn't falter. She wasn't going to let this thing, take her. Not after everything she had seen, after everything she had fought for. The creature advanced again, its glowing eyes fixed on Ella. You will join us, it whispered, reaching out a hand toward her. But Ella wasn't going to let it win. She had learned too much, seen too much. The truth was clear now. This house, this curse, it wasn't just a part of Mia's family. It had been passed down through generations, a dark legacy that had consumed everyone who had come into its grasp. And the way to break it? Ella no sabía si era una opción. She didn't know if it was even possible. But she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't going down without a fight. As the figure reached out for her, Ella slammed her hands against the walls, her fingers brushing the glowing symbols etched into the stone. The moment she touched them, the house trembled, and a force shot through her, a rush of cold energy that nearly knocked her off her feet. For a brief second, the house seemed to pause, as if uncertain. The glow of the symbols brightened. Ella could hear the faint whispers again, the voices of countless souls trapped in this house, screaming for freedom. The creature hissed in fury, its hands clawing at the air. "No, you will not destroy what we have built." But Ella was stronger now. She could feel it. Whatever power the house had over her, it was weakening. The symbols were resonating, as though the house itself was starting to react to her presence. Claire was beside her now, her face pale with fear. "Ella, no, don't touch them. You don't know what you're doing." But Ella's fingers were already moving, tracing the symbols in the air. The energy was alive beneath her fingertips, pulsing with a rhythm, a power. This was it. This was the key. She felt the presence of the house, its hunger, its thirst, pressing against her. But she didn't waver. This was the heart of the curse, and she was going to destroy it. With one final surge of strength, Ella placed her palms against the wall, and she felt it. A wave of energy, so cold and so powerful, it nearly tore her apart. The house screamed, a terrible, inhuman screech, as the symbols erupted in bright, blinding light. The air around her cracked, the walls of the house warping, bending, breaking. And then, with a deafening crash, the light exploded outward. When Ella opened her eyes again, the room was empty. The walls were still, silent. The symbols that had once glowed with an otherworldly power were now dark and lifeless. The creature, Mia, was gone. The house, that terrible force that had once filled every corner of her mind, was now eerily still. She felt a strange quiet in the air. The suffocating weight was gone, and she could breathe again. Ella se tambaleó hacia sus pies, su cuerpo dolorido y magullado, pero ella estaba viva. The curse had been broken. She turned to look at Claire, who was standing at the edge of the room, her expression unreadable. But there was something in her eyes now, a glimmer of relief, of gratitude. "It's over," Ella whispered, her voice hoarse. Claire nodded, her lips trembling. "You did it. You stopped it." Ella's heart raced in her chest. The house was still standing, but it no longer held power over her, or over Mia. The curse was broken. The souls trapped within its walls would finally be free. But as Ella walked toward the exit, she knew that this was just one story in a long history of suffering. There were more houses, more curses, more forces beyond her understanding. But for now, she had done what she thought was impossible. And for that, she would be proud. Ella stepped outside into the night, the chill air wrapping around her like a blanket. The house behind her stood silent, its power finally extinguished. For the first time since she'd entered, Ella felt free.